think leadership of people and how to connect with people and how to influence others to accomplish things is largely from my time in the military.
This is the Construction Veteran Podcast.
Construction Veteran Podcast.
Connecting and celebrating veterans in construction. Now, here's your host, Scott Friend.
Welcome back to the Construction Veteran. I'm Scott Friend. I'm excited to bring to you guys Jack Sipes, a former client of mine, a West Point grad, with an amazing story of how he came up in commercial real estate. Let's dig into it. Hey, Jack, how are you, sir?
Scott, I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm good. It's good to talk to you again. It's been a few years now.
It has been a little while. Time flies and things change. It's been an odd time anyway with the kind of post COVID and we met each other post COVID, but it's just been a different sort of last 3-4 years than any other time in my career.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So Jack and I know each other. He was a former client of mine with a former employer, and I got to say that you were up there with one of the top 3 customers I've worked with. Jack is in our industry as well. We'll go into a little bit of that. And it's always a pleasure having somebody that understands the struggles in the construction industry when it comes to material or delivering a project exactly how people want it. So that was really refreshing, Jack.
Thanks. It was the good and bad. The bad is that we are developers. We develop apartments, and we do a lot of our own design work. And we've done a lot of probably 20,000 units now at this point that we've done. And so we think we know a lot too. So that's good and bad. It's good we understand stuff, but it's bad that we try to tell you what to do sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think, a good thing too, if you have a bad contractor you're working with, their tricks, right?
Right. That's very true.
Very cool. So Jack, let's talk about your service background. You have a really cool story. I want to talk about where you're from and what got you into the service and your pathway through West Point.
Right. Well, I'm one of 10 kids. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. My dad, the story was he enlisted on December 8th, 1941. So he and his buddies were out were out bowling, and they, got the word that the Pearl Harbor was bombed, and so they stayed out all night and then enlisted the next day. Now, just a quick aside. So I tried to get his service records for a long time. He passed away in 2001. I tried to get his service records for a long time, and if you didn't know, most of the service records from the 70s and earlier were stored in a warehouse in St. Louis that caught fire, and so they were destroyed, or at least in a spot where people couldn't figure it out anymore. So I would every few years would ask to try to get his records, and finally they've digitized most of it. And when they digitized it, it's all sort of sortable now. So I was able to get his records, and that's really cool because I could see where he was and what units he was in and what he did. But it did put the myth. He did not enlist on December 8th, 1941. He enlisted like January of 42.
Oh.
So he served, and he was artilleryman, which influenced me, and I was a gun sergeant and had a 105 howitzer all through kind of battle. He landed about 30 days after D-Day and fought up through the Ardennes and into Germany and the surrender. So I'd say I have some military influence, although not really. He got out in late 45, and but I went to West Point. I was really good in school. I was a good athlete, and I was involved in a lot of leadership things. And those are kind of the three legs to the stool that West Point's looking for in candidates. And so my interest aligned with West Point's what they were looking for. And so I went to West Point, and clearly, if most people know, but when you graduate, you're a commissioned officer, and then you have a 6-year commitment afterwards. And so kind of set me on the path to my time in the military. This would have been, I went to West Point 83 to 87, and then graduated in 87, went to airborne school, went to artillery basic, officer basic, then went to Ranger school, and went to Korea for my first year. So I had the first about year and a half post graduation, I was just a whirlwind of going places and doing exciting things that you only dream about.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It was go for you then right after school. airborne, Ranger School. We
Yeah,
hear a lot
it
of the
was
horror stories of
something.
Ranger School. Did you make it through in one pass?
I did. And
Wow.
yeah, it's I think about a third, I think, of my class made it through on straight without having to recycle anything. But and then just over 50% of the people that started ended up graduating. So yeah, I was a winter ranger too, and it was pretty cold. I've been cold, but being really really cold and really really wet was something. I
Yeah.
I think my toughest spot was in Florida. We walked for a couple days in the rain, and it was in the 40s and 50s out, and
Man.
had a ranger buddy that made me a cup of coffee and basically saved me because I was fading fast.
Yeah. Wet, tired, cold, and hungry.
Yeah. Yep.
Jeez. And so you were artillery, you said, correct?
Yeah. So I was an artillery officer and started off in Korea and as a fire support officer for a tank company. So very interesting. I thought of all the places I would go that might, have some sort of a real. This is, late '80s again, and we hadn't fought as a country since. I mean, there was Grenada in '83, but we hadn't really fought as a country since Vietnam, and there weren't really any prospects of fighting again. My mom used to tell me how scared she was I was going to go to war, and I'm like, Mom, unless the Soviets attacked the Fulda Gap in Germany, well, I'm not going to war. And
Yeah.
so the world changes.
A lot of your time in, was it mostly training then, or did you guys do like a training deployment, or how did that go since we were in peacetime?
In Korea, now we have, there's a real
Yeah.
war mission there. So we would do alerts and go to our battle positions, and I was about 10 miles from the North Korea border, and it was a real world mission, and we had live ammo that we would take war ammo with us whenever we go to the field, and just in case. And it was the kind of other interesting thing was I was there for the Olympics in 1988. So about the first half of the Olympics, we were on sort of alert because there was some speculation that North Korea would do something to just try to disrupt the Olympics. But in the second half, when it was clear that wasn't going to happen, I got to go down and went to probably 10 different events. I just went to track and basketball and
Oh, that's cool.
boxing and wrestling and gymnastics. It was really neat, really good
Oh
experience.
man.
That's the kind of things in the military that you would have, those opportunities to do sort of odd things that you never think you'd ever do, and then you get to do them.
Yeah. So other than the Olympics, did you ever have any time where you thought, okay, this is going to happen, North Korea's going to take action?
No, I almost burned down South Korea though. We were
Oh no.
I was an evaluator, kind of observer controller for another battalion's evaluation, and so I would go around and throw artillery simulators to simulate artillery, and they would have to react to it. So I get a thing to go to the top of this hill and do artillery. So we can't take the Humvee up there, so I end up climbing up about the last 50 yards straight up the side of this mountain. So I get to the top, and I'm just like, do I really? So I think I go ahead and throw one, and it's in the summer and it's really really dry there. So it's monsoonal, but then it's dry. It's dry before and after. Anyway, so I throw this artillery simulator in the grass top of the hill, and it catches on fire, and it's spreading fast. And my driver's down, 50 yards away, and I'm up on top of this hill, thinking, I'm second lieutenant in the army. I'm going to burn down Korea, and this could, what a flame out of a career. But so I'm up there stamping like a madman. I was able to stamp it all out, but I come down and I'm just black from soot. I'm sweating. My driver's like, "What's up?" I'm like, "Nothing."
I would have enjoyed hearing the battalion
Right.
commander's after action
No.
report on that one.
Yeah, it was hilarious for me.
Oh, that's
Sort of.
awesome. So did you just do the 6 in? Did you do more than that?
No, I was in Korea for a year, then I went to Fort Hood, and that's kind of where my mom's like, "Oh, you're gonna go to war." I'm like, "Mom, we're not going to war. Let's Soviet stack." And then coming up on a 4-day weekend, that's another kind of good thing about the military. 3-day weekends always became 4-day weekends, and so coming up on a 4-day weekend, I was the battalion maintenance officer for a self-propelled artillery battalion. And so I had my team there because we're going to go to the National Training Center in a couple months. And so we were dropping at the time in the supply system, you had to hand write out these cards to drop requisitions for stuff. So we were requisitioning all of our stuff for the National Training Center. And so we were, so everybody else took off for a 4-day, on a Friday at noon for a 4-day weekend. And so we're there in the afternoon, and my boss calls me up and says, "Hey, come up to the battalion headquarters." So I get up there, and he said the colonel just got called in. He goes, "I think we're gonna get alerted to deploy because of this Kuwait stuff." I'm like, "Really?" So that's shocking. So I went back, and I'm like, "Well, if we're gonna go, I'm gonna need some ports." So we dropped all of 1,000 some odd requisitions for parts and things, and we were ahead of everybody. So that was my sort of claim to fame in the first Gulf War was we were stocked and no one else was, because I was in the first Cav division. I was basically the first guy to drop requisitions for parts and things because I was getting ready for NTC. So fortuitous. But yeah, so we trained up and went to the first Gulf War, and I got there in mid-September, and the time clearly what happened post 9/11 between Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a much different level of fight and war over a lot of years, and intense fighting. But at the time there wasn't. And so when we got there, we were essentially, there was 30 or 40 Iraqi divisions, and there was, I think, 2 of us on the ground, us and the 101st. And so we were basically supposed to just kind of die in place, sort of delay them as much as possible if they were to attack. So as it turns out, we the best trained and best equipped military in the world, beat the Iraqis. But in September, that wasn't so obvious and it wasn't so clear, and so there was some months of real apprehension, and then you never know how you're going to react when you go to war. And so I'm proud of what my team and I did, and mostly that's down to training and discipline and what you do in the military, which is you are clear about what the objective is, and clear about how to train for it, and then you train, and then when it comes time to execute, you do it. And those are super lessons that I've used throughout the rest of my career as well.
Yeah. So let me back up to West Point. What did you study there?
My major was engineering management,
Okay.
and so so a mix of engineering classes and management, so kind of hard and soft.
So do you think it was your dad's time of service that it really launched you into wanting to go artillery instead of going to an engineer unit?
No, I think when we it's the people that were going artillery, it was a very people oriented, and I liked a lot of people that were doing it. And when we did our summer trainings, the artillery seemed like a pretty motivated, kind of squared away group. And so I think it was more, wanted to do the combat arms, and I wanted to go to something where, I liked the people that I was with, both my peers and my soldiers that I worked with.
Yeah,
But I think
good.
that had something to do with it too. It was kind of neat. I mean, my dad was a gun chief for 3 years in World War II, and it was a neat parallel.
Yeah. So let's go back. So you did your deployment to the Gulf War. You finished up your time. What did you? First off, I guess, what made you decide to get out, and what were you looking at doing when you got out of the service?
So came back from the Gulf War, went to the Artillery Advanced Course, went to Fort Ord, California, and with the 7th ID, which was a light, and liked what I was doing. I got married right around the same time, and was deployed a lot. With the 7 ID was part of the Rapid Deployment Force, and so we deployed a few times, different places, and so I was gone a lot. Plus, there was this was 1992, 93, and there was kind of the peace dividend. Clinton was elected. There was the military was downsizing. They were paying people to get out, and I just fought a war that looked like there might not be something else for 20 years. And so I think a lot of things, I think there was some societal sort of, like, what are you going to do that you've done that? A little bit. There was the military was downsizing. It didn't look like the mission was going to be all that interesting. It was pretty predictable, and I had a young family, and so I would say that I loved the Army, but I was, sort of senior captain, not quite a major, and there were some things I didn't like, and so it seems, it was a difficult decision for me. A lot of people, I think, jumped at the chance, but it was really difficult for me because I love the Army, but anyway, so when you get out, I went through a recruiter that specializes in bringing junior officers to the corporate America, and generally there's two tracks that you come out in. One is, at least at the time, it was kind of a technical sales, so medical sales or pharmaceutical sales or chemical sales, or sort of manufacturing supervision. So I interviewed, and the numbers aren't exact, but they're kind of close. I interviewed probably 8 sales jobs and 8 supervisory jobs and 1 real estate job. And so it was just so different than everything else. And it was with a company called Archstone, which was an apartment developer, it was a real estate investment trust, public real estate company. And so one of the guys that was running one of the groups there had hired militaries before, and so they were trying to do that again. They ended up hiring about 8 of us over 2 years. But anyway, it was so different, and kind of in a career when everyone's doing the same thing and there's a chance to do something different, I jumped at something different. And so I didn't really know anything about it. I really, beyond it being just different than what everybody else was doing, and I like the people that I talked to. I think, ultimately, a lot of the moves I make, I think, in my life have been toward a plan. I've always sort of had, I want a direction I wanted to go and a career path I wanted to go. But I also, you spend so much time at work that if you don't like and respect the people you're with, it's not a very satisfying life. So I liked and respected the people that I interviewed with there and talked to, and it looked like a really interesting sort of career path. So I joined Archstone as a management trainee in their property management.
Yeah, well, let me say, when you made that decision for your family, I think that's always the right thing to do for sure. And I know a lot of people are torn about that. They have that love for country and love for service, but I've always said that making that decision is never the wrong one for sure. So good on you, Jack.
Right. As it turned out, though, I mean, in 2001, after 9/11, I really, I had regrets. A lot of people that I went to school with and were still in the military at the time, and they would have been majors at the time. They were going to war, and it was not a Gulf War One that that was kind of done in and out in 9 months. It was real, and it was sort of an existential threat to the country, and I really it was sleepless nights sometimes, just sort of regretting maybe that I did the wrong thing not being there, to go into war in Afghanistan or Iraq back in the Gulf with the war on terror.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. So let me ask this. So we talked about the transition piece that kind of got you into that world. So you didn't really have real estate on the mind getting out. It was just kind of a connection that you made.
It was, and really when it comes down to it, and I think people that spend some time in the military, they don't really know what the civilian world does, especially if you spend a lot of time in the military. I mean, you kind of know, but you kind of don't too. And so, I wasn't sure exactly how everything all worked. And, I'd gone straight from, high school to West Point, which was military, and then into the Army. And so I didn't really know how everything worked. And so, I think a lot of people just sort of stumble into careers, and I stumbled into this one. And really, if there was anything about it, it was that it was so different than what everybody else was doing. All the other sort of junior officers were getting out, were going to Johnson and Johnson and selling surgical tools, or Procter and Gamble and selling soap. And so it was just really so different, going to apartment management and apartment development.
Yeah, so I think this really speaks to the value of networking and relationships for sure.
Some things you just kind of fall into, and then you're good at them. And I think that's people say follow your passions, but I think it's really kind of find something you're good at and you can get paid at, and it'll probably be a passion. But anyway, I kind of fell into it, and people in property management either love it or hate it, because it can be a real grind, and I did pretty well with the grind.
Yeah, so that kind of segues into my next question. So you're not necessarily in the field side of the industry. Let's talk about what you do now.
I have been in sort of executive levels of leadership of property management or real estate development companies for the last, I guess, 20 years. It's been about 2003, 2004. I started off as a regional manager, managing properties, and then both because I liked the education, and also I wanted it to advance. I was ambitious and wanted to advance a career. I got my master's in business administration from University of Texas Austin in their executive program, which was every other Friday and Saturday all day for basically 2 years. And so that led me to being more involved in acquisitions and financing and then higher levels of management. So I worked up to be the chief operating officer of an apartment company, about a 15,000 unit apartment company in Austin, and then eventually worked my way to Dominium, which is about a 40,000 unit apartment developer and apartment company based in what we were based. I'd say we used to say we were based in Minnesota, but now we're really spread amongst the South and Southeast and Southwest, because that's where the growth is. So we have offices in Atlanta, Dallas, and Phoenix. I'm in the Dallas office, which is kind of the main office. I've been headed up the management company for the last 12 years for Dominium, and I'm currently I've found my replacement, and so that person's in place, and now I'm an executive partner with Dominium. I'm on the investment committee and the executive committee, and teach leadership classes, and have about 3 or 4 projects, as well as a lot of our charitable. I head up our charitable group too, that gives back to the community. And so I'm closer to the end than the beginning, Scott.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, and you were pretty involved. So I had stated earlier, Jack and I worked together. We actually built his office here in Dallas, and I was the superintendent on that project, but you were heavily involved. We would refer to Jack as like the owner's side, basically, whoever the customer that we're building for. But you and your team were really involved almost in the day-to-day process, in your role overseeing, telling us what you want, what you didn't like, what you did like. So although you're in property management, you also oversee the construction aspect as well, even though you have people managing that process on the day-to-day.
Right, and that's that is comes back to, we're apartment developers and we build apartments, and we are heavily involved in the design, and so we were heavily involved in the design and kind of the execution there too. But when we during COVID, it's kind of a quick interesting story here. During COVID, when things sort of stopped, and there was this is in the summer of 2020, we said, well, what's a big move we can make? And we had planned on we were based in Minnesota and done a lot of our work in Minnesota, although we, apartments follow jobs, and job growth's been, across the Southeast, Texas, Southwest. And so we'd been acquiring and starting to build in the Southeast and Southwest in Texas. But we said, what's a big move we could make that kind of accelerate things while everybody else is kind of, focused on COVID? What could we do big? And so we had planned on opening offices in closer to where we were doing business, but we went kind of big during COVID, and we moved all of our development out from Minnesota to Atlanta, Dallas, and Phoenix, and senior people moved too. So I was in Minnesota, and I moved to Dallas, and so I was the senior person in Dallas. The CEO actually moved to Phoenix, and we had a couple of our very senior development people moved to Atlanta. So I was, when I moved from Minnesota there in 2020, 2021, I was the senior person here running the Dallas office, and so I was involved in those kind of things that, directly working with you.
Yeah, it was a really enjoyable time, Jack. I appreciated it. So you kind of alluded to it earlier on how your service helped you, but are there a couple of key takeaways that you have in your role now that you think your time in the service really helped with?
Well, I mean, there's so many, because ultimately I went, smaller to bigger organizational leadership and organizational and executive leadership. And so, you learn that in the military, because they're, everything, when things are, from the squad up to the U.S. Army. So, you learn lessons of that, but really it's mostly, most everything in the world is people and leadership. And so, from a very young age, I was in charge of people and in charge of getting things done. And so I had really early on, because I was, second lieutenant, and, when you wear gold, you're supposedly, your brain gets put on hold.
Yeah.
But so I had, second lieutenant and major. Those are the kind of tiering. But but I had really great NCOs that taught me how things worked and taught me how to lead people at a very micro, at a very personal level. And so, the lessons I think. So, Scott, to answer your question first, I think leadership of people and how to connect with people and how to influence others to accomplish things is largely from my time in the military. So everything from then has gotten more complex or different or higher dollars, but still it comes down to making people feel like they can make a difference and that treating them as individuals and using a team to accomplish a lot more than any individuals could accomplish. I think that's, all other things aside, I attribute that to my time in the military, both at West Point, which is basically 4 years of leadership lab, and then the military, which is, for me, it was 7 years of practical leading people and being led and understanding, motivations and how to get things done. So I think that's first and foremost. And then certainly the planning aspect of it, the operations order and how to plan for operations or is project management. Certainly, having that strong focus or sort of drive and determination to accomplish a goal or accomplish a task is very military focused, and I brought that to the real estate world as well. So I think those there's a lot of things, but certainly the leadership, the organization, and drive and determination. There's all
very well
sorts of
said.
quotes out there. Everybody has leadership things they hear in there, but the determined person beats the talented person almost every time, and that's a long time lesson for me is if you apply yourself and are determined and smart about how to get there, that's generally a winning, and that's that's a real military aspect, I think.
Yeah, very good nuggets of wisdom there. I appreciate it. And I'm sure your worst day at work was nowhere near your worst day at Ranger School.
Yeah, it's a blur.
Yeah,
I remember some of it, but it's pretty blurry.
Yeah. Well, you get to eat and you get to sleep eventually, right?
Right. So everybody sort of fantasizes about things. Mine was RB beef and cheddars when I was at Ranger School. I dropped about 25 pounds in the 60 days, but just for some reason the Arby's beef and cheddar was just, that was my God, I wish I had one. So after I finished that afternoon, I drove from Fort Benning, Georgia, up to my family's home in Ohio. And I think I stopped at 8 Arby's en route and had beef and cheddars the whole way home. I was sick when I got home. It's an 8-hour
I can
drive,
imagine.
and I just had about a dozen beef and cheddars of that day.
Oh man, I cannot imagine how you felt the next day.
Funny, yeah.
So you had quite an interesting journey, and obviously you've become quite successful in your career. But looking back, do you think there's anything that you would change along the way, or?
I look back at things that I could have done better, and in almost every case, that's a very interesting question, Scott, because you can't, right? I mean, you can't go back.
Yeah.
You can analyze what you've done and say, well, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not touching that hot stove again, or, well, that didn't work, or that really worked. I want to do more of that. So I think when I first got my master's, I sort of doggedly pursued a partnership interest in something, which really, and I got it, and then that led to more ownership as I went along in different places. And I think that's that's the most of the great wealth in the country is from real estate developers. If you look at all of the real wealth over the last 250 years in the country, a lot of it's real estate development. And so starting off with that small ownership piece, and then it sort of became an expectation everywhere I'd go that I would take a position that had a shot at some ownership piece, was really made a huge difference in my life. It's where I am today. It's because of that coming out of getting my MBA and working to get an ownership piece in something.
Yeah, I guess I asked the question mainly because there's plenty of other people out there that West Point grads or people that are still in that look up to a guy like you and maybe think, hey, if there's something he could have done differently, that maybe they could improve too. But I appreciate you sharing that, and that's good. Good
I tell
words
you,
of wisdom
Scott,
there.
I have it's never let me down. Now it doesn't work for everybody
Yeah.
else necessarily, but education has been, and I've got I've got a lot of the certifications that you get in real estate, and but those are just certifications. But the education has been, I think it's been a life-changing thing for me. So the every sort of pivot point, a point where I can either self-learn something and become the expert at it, and then become, you know, counted on to do things, and also, compensated because of it. But education has been a real game changer for me. Both from formal education and then certifications, and then just on the job trainings. Being curious. I think that's probably education, both formal and informal, and the curiosity to want to figure out how things work, and then make them better. Those are skills that are always in demand, and they'll always be compensated some way.
Yeah. Well said. So we've got, I'm sure you've ran into plenty of other veterans in property management, real estate, construction. And as we know, there's a lot of long, hard days sometimes in that arena. And burnout happens quite frequently. We just came out of Mental Health Awareness Month. If you have people out there listening, specifically veterans that are just, the mental health crisis has gotten just worse and worse over the 20 years
Right.
we were in war, and then going into a stressful industry. What would you personally say to somebody that came to you and said, Jack, hey, I'm just really having a rough time, man. I don't know what to do. And they're kind of at their wit's end.
Well, I'll do the setup to what I think leads to that, and then what I try to do. I think the hardest thing for me when I got out was the lack of camaraderie. You're around a bunch of people that are similar to you, different backgrounds and different, but similar. We're doing the same things, we're working on the same goals, we're have a lot of the same interests. Work ends, and you go to the bar together, or you do sports together. But there's a great sense of camaraderie that you have in the military. And then I got out, and that was just, it was the greatest shock. Is how that kind of went from this sort of huge cohort of people like me doing similar things and enjoying the similar things, and then being on my own. So I think that that lack of a little bit of lack of identity. One, there's ego and identity. I'm doing these great things, and I get out, and I'm not doing those great things anymore. That was in a hard day. You always said, well, at least I'm protecting. At least I'm defending the country. And you get out, and that's not really what you got in a regular job. You're not really, you're supporting your family. But that sort of shock of not of having a support network of people that are similar to you, and having that deep sense of camaraderie and trust, and then you come out and don't have that. So I think that first is a huge shock for people, and I think it's the greatest. I still miss it. I said still. I got out in 1994, and I still miss that. So I've been out, what's that, 30 years? Good Lord. But I still miss that piece of it. I still miss the camaraderie. And so I've, tried to keep those relationships and networks of people that I knew in the military. My best friends are still the people that I went to West Point, went to war with. And so, don't be alone. Talk to people, and the people that probably have the greatest understanding, and the people that you knew in those times, or people that were also in the military now. But I think people that sort of lose hope, I think, get really lonely and don't have somebody to talk to, and have that sense of camaraderie. And so I think that's really the most important thing. Surround yourself with people that have been through what you've gone through, and talk about it, and maintain that, try to find that camaraderie on, small or large level. I think, and it's hard because, I think I have, through a lot of the people I went to school with, and the people I was in the Army with, and I've kept in touch with, 10 or so of them. I do whenever I go, whenever I move, and I've moved a lot. I moved a lot in the Army. I moved a lot in the civilian world too, for opportunities. That's the one thing about you think when you get out you don't have to move, and you don't. But if you're ambitious and you want new opportunities, sometimes you got to move. And so I've always connected with the military networks in town, either West Point societies or you know AUSA or just other sort of military type things that for years I did recruiting for West Point too, as when I was in the reserves, and then kept doing it afterwards, and it just puts me in contact with other people in the military. So I'm talking a lot, I'm rambling a little bit, but I think that loss of sense of camaraderie, and that not having people like you that you can just talk to and feel comfortable with, you got to replace that, and you replace that with wherever you can find it, with people that were probably in the military also before.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when we were working together, I think I connected you with another West Point grad friend of mine too. So that's always, I found that neat, that the West Point grads, that instant connection. You served together, you went through the same junk through school, and
Right.
you kind of, just like a fellow vet that I run into at a job site, you kind of you have this expectation that, hey, this person most likely has the same morals that I do,
Right.
probably has the same drive that I do, probably somebody I can count on too. So I totally agree with you, and I think every person I talk to, that's the one thing that they miss, is that teamwork aspect of working towards the same goal. And they're very A-type, most of them very A-type driven individuals.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it was a I don't know about you, but it was a shock. The first
Oh
year
yeah,
I was out,
100%.
man, I was like, what did I do? I'm thinking about going
Yeah.
back in, because I just missed it so much. It was such a maybe taken for granted big piece of my life.
Yeah, quick story. I got a year early out. This is when they were doing the reduction in force in 2011.
Hmm.
So I signed up, got the year early out because I was already enrolled in college. And immediately that first year, I went just like you, what am I doing? And I tried to get back into every single branch I could find. Looking back, thank God I didn't know about like the National Guard. But
Right.
every branch I talked to, it was, well, you got to go through this. Or I went to the Marine Corps and they said, oh, well, you're going to get dropped back to E1. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to have some 18-year-old kid, Lance Corporal, screaming at me that hasn't even been to any war zone at all. So that was an
Right.
ego thing, but thankfully I didn't. But I struggled for a long time, and it took me close to a decade to just kind of get comfortable in who I was. Because like you said, you go straight from high school in your position, you go straight to West Point and then straight into the service. With me being enlisted first, it was straight out of high school into the military, and that's all I ever knew. So
Right.
you're dumped into this world, like you said, you don't even know anything really about and how to navigate it, and you kind of feel alone for a while. But to your point, what really helped me through was connecting with other veterans that are going, "Hey, I feel the same way. Let's talk about this." And I think that's gotten a lot more acceptable in the last 5 to 10 years or so. That, hey, look, it's all right to chat about not being okay, man. It's cool. You're not a wuss. Let's discuss it. Everybody
Right.
has these same
Right.
challenges.
And what's gotten harder too is it's a lonelier world. Everyone's, every, people are so used to just connecting electronically and not face to face and not voice, and it's a lonelier world, which just, I think, um, it really makes the mental health piece of it even more difficult. So I think, as much
Yeah.
as you can get face to face with people or just talk to people, I think humans are not meant to sit by themselves in a room looking at a screen. They're meant to interact with other humans.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
great
And
thing
I'm
about
kind of
real
a
estate too,
hypocrite.
which is why, I
Yeah.
mean, that's one of the great things about real estate. It's all it's a hard asset, and you can't build a building sitting in your office on a computer screen.
Yeah. AI is not going to replace my job anytime soon. That's for
Right.
sure.
Right.
Well, in closing here, Jack, let me ask one last question. We know we need people desperately, whether that's in property management, project management, the field, just the whole building industry as a whole. And if we've got folks that are transitioning out of the service, what would you say to that person to try to encourage them to get into this industry if they don't realize this is probably a very good fit for them?
I think it really, I think it comes back to, you don't really know what's out there when you're getting out, and so I think some sort of awareness of that. You ever heard of a company called Forge Now? They basically, do
Yeah,
you know them?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they put together basically a training program for plumbing, electrical, and I think they've got a facilities management now too, where they basically are taking people that are getting out, use some of the resources from the military to get them into the trades that work in there. And I think something like that is I think a tremendous way to get to transition from the military into real estate development management, construction, something like Forge now. But how do you make people aware? I mean, I've gone I've gone around to like the Fort Bennings of the world. I think it's Fort Moore now. They changed all the names since I was in, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I struggle with them in Fort Hood, Fort Cavazos, and try to work through the groups there. But it's so hard to enter in there and get to make an impact with people. So but there's a lot online. I think just awareness that the things that you learned and made you successful in the military are really really hard are important skills that'll make you successful in the construction and management and real estate. So, the awareness that those skills really can translate better than probably a lot of other skills into a career is a big piece of it. And I think that's one thing with your podcast that I think you're able to do is maybe reach some people that are in and are looking for the next thing and understand that that real estate and construction is a great path for you.
Yeah, it has been humbling since I started the show. People have reached out to me that are transitioning and they've listened, and I'm making a small dent, and I appreciate it. And getting guys like you on has really helped. Just kind of open people's eyes to what's out there. It's nothing against the guys that swing hammers. I did it, but there's just this whole other world in the building industry, and we need people now more than ever. Things are just booming right now, which is great.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. It's especially for us on the facilities and maintenance side. I mean, it was a problem before COVID. It was a big problem during COVID, and still here afterwards. We're dramatically short people with the skills to run facilities and to run teams, and so that's it's demand. It's in demand. It's certainly in demand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be sure to tag you when we post this, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure it's okay if somebody shoots you a message on LinkedIn. You're on there quite a bit.
Absolutely.
And maybe just need some advice or somebody to get connected to.
I talk to people as much as I possibly can, and I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to, I'm sort of like I said, I'm close to the end of my career than the beginning, and so if I can give back by just talking to people and talking about my experiences and talking with them about what they might do, happy to do it, and I like to do it. So and I do it often. So I'm happy to do that, Scott.
Yeah, you're certainly leaving a legacy, Jack. I appreciate your time. You're a busy guy, so thank you so much for being on here with me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. It was a great hour. Enjoyed it.
Yes, sir.
All right.
If you're a military veteran in the construction industry, or you're in the construction industry and support our military vets, and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, you can find me at constructionvetpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a message on LinkedIn. You can find me there at Scott Friend. Let's share the stories and motivate others.